Welcome back to Out of the Blue, the podcast, where we explore the moments that come out of nowhere, the moments that crack us open, and if we're willing, give us a chance to begin again. I'm Vernon West, here with my co-host, my son Vernon West III, the creative force behind our logo and our theme music. Today's guest brings us a story not defined by what nearly destroyed him, but by what could not break him. Dave Loiterstein's life has been shaped by deep wounds, fierce battles with addiction, and moments when survival itself was uncertain. He searched for belonging, found chaos instead, and lived through relapses, loss, and brushes with death that most people don't survive. But Dave came back again and again. His story is one of surrender and resilience, of standing back up with honesty, humility, and the willingness to ask for help. He survived heart failure, a heart transplant, and even setbacks in recovery, and each time chose life. Today, Dave lives in a deep, meaningful sobriety. He serves others in recovery, lives with gratitude for his family and his second heart, and has learned something he once believed was impossible: how to love and accept himself. This is a story about resilience, about community, about choosing life again. So take a breath, lean in, and join us. Dave Loiterstein, welcome to Out of the Blue, the podcast.
Thank you so much. It's really an honor to be here, guys.
It's an honor
Thanks
to
for
have you,
having
Dave.
me.
An honor to have you, Dave. An honor. Just talking about something about how the girl, the actress, came out and talking about her relapse. The girl who played in what do you know her name? Sierra Leone, I guess. But she's come out publicly about relapsing, and everyone thinks about it as being so courageous because the worst thing about addiction is the fact that relapse is inevitable and then very hard to avoid. And when you can overcome that and then come back stronger, I think that is what it's about. I know I take my sobriety is contingent on a daily, you know,
Reprieve.
yeah, daily blessing from using the tools. And I'm amazed when I found out you were substance abuse and giving your service to people, helping people. That's a hard job, man. I kudos to you for doing that because you must encounter some real trying cases. But it's beautiful though. So, Dave. Now I said a lot about your life, but I think I want to hear it from you. Tell us your
Yeah.
story. I'll shut up now.
Oh no, I mean you nailed all the key elements of my life. I definitely started extremely young. I was actually leading a group therapy session today, and we were talking about, the disease concept. And I shared with the group that I personally believe that I was born with this, because I was adopted into a very loving family. They were not drug addicts or alcoholics. They did have a liquor cabinet, and I was around 6 or 7 years old, but I had this empty hole in my soul as you mentioned I was, and I mentioned, that I was adopted, but I had this feeling as a very young child that, well, if my own mother didn't love me, nobody in this world is ever going to love me. So I just felt empty. And even though I had the love of this, very caring, supportive family, I quickly turned to drugs and alcohol. First, it was alcohol, so initially it was my babysitters that were able to open the cabinet and give me alcohol. And then they had marijuana. But pretty quickly, I knew how to break into that thing. And then in third grade, a friend of mine, well, he moved to Missouri, the United States from Canada, and we met in third grade in school. And his parents had a liquor cabinet, so we together, as uh, two criminals, if you will, were breaking into our parents' liquor cabinets, drinking together. And then friends, older kids in the neighborhood had marijuana, and we started experimenting, and then came mushrooms, et cetera, et cetera. But you know, we were just off and running at a very early age. So, circling back, I believe that I was genetically predisposed, to having a problem because I reacted and my body reacted and my brain reacted very differently, right away to drugs and alcohol than other people do.
I definitely resonate with that, Dave. I know that feeling. I definitely feel like I look at my own family tree, and my father was a definite alcoholic. I believe his father was, and even my grandfather on my Italian side. No one ever talks about my grandfather on my Italian side as being an alcoholic, but let me tell you, he made wine and he died of alcoholism, of cirrhosis of the liver. I think he was. Just a guess, but I think there was something that ran in my family too, and it's a gene, and if you escape it, I think you're blessed. But I
Hmm.
mean, I don't think my son, for example, he didn't. I don't think he got the bite. Like the phenomenon of craving, I think is what it makes me think of. Like whenever
I
I
wouldn't say that, but I do want to ask you, Dave, when you say you were you it reacted to it differently, does that mean you kind of instead of getting like I don't know how far we into monetize this on YouTube, but fu instead of getting fucked up, you got like stable or like you like
made you feel
what
normal.
yeah, what does that mean to you? Like you sensed it was different.
Yeah. So, for example, some people may drink until they feel the point of, oh, I'm feeling funny. I better stop. To me, that triggers, oh boy, I need way more of this. Keep going until the point to where I black out.
I see.
Like that's
So
the goal, to get obliterated.
to completely escape, to completely forget your current circumstances.
Yes, it's an obsession of the mind and an allergy of the body, as described in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. But we're talking about brain chemistry. My brain is wired differently. You know, I can't just have a half a drink and leave it at the table and walk away. That's alcohol abuse to me.
Oh boy,
You
yeah.
know, that drives me crazy when I see people do that.
Yeah, right. I remember the first time I went drinking with my friends, and I must have been 16 or something. And we had a couple of beers. Each of us was drinking a beer. And my friend took a sip, and then he threw the can into the rocks of the beach. And I said, "Was there beer in there?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "Yeah, you crazy."
Exactly. But no, I mean, so early on, I would, when we'd break into my parents' liquor cabinet, I would take multiple bottles and I'd fill up a glass this big and I'd drink two of those, to where I would lay on the couch and pass out, and I'd start throwing up and choking on it. And my friend would have to save me. And we're talking single digit age. That's probably not very normal, I would imagine. So I was drinking as an alcoholic at a very early age.
Wow.
So that examples such as that lead me to believe that I was probably different than my fellows. I was probably drinking alcoholically because I was predisposed. Just my
Sounds that way.
opinion.
Yeah.
Just my
I
Sure.
opinion.
I mean, the medical community doesn't really have a cure for alcoholism, but it just
No.
does seem that we do find a cure, or at least a way to arrest it with using the program.
Well, it says that it's treatable.
Treatable.
They call it a progressive, chronic, fatal disease. However, it is treatable.
That's a key word there, treatable. And it gives you,
Absolutely.
when you're going through that world, I know for me, the word treatable was like a little dot of light in the black hole. That you mean there's a help out there for this? Because I just personally, I hit my own bottom, and I had I lost hope. I thought there was no way. I mean, I didn't want to stop. I had no desire to stop, and but yet I didn't want to do it. It's like the worst dichotomy you can possibly. It's really is like hell. Pulls you both ways. You want to stop because you know it sucks for you, but you can't stop because you can't imagine not. You know. So how did you finally do it? Though, what was your big moment? Was there a big moment that you had several, I think, times when you stopped and
Yes. So my personal story is full of relapse, and I do not subscribe to relapse is part of recovery. I think relapse is part of relapse, and it's not necessary. I know plenty of friends that, got sober and stayed sober and never relapsed. Obviously, that's the safer approach because plenty of people get sober, relapse, and die or go to prison. Consequences can be fatal. Fortunately, that wasn't my story. I have many relapses. And I'd like to pause and say that I do enjoy telling my story because one of the key messages that I think it says is never give up, keep going, always get back up. It's not how many times you fall, but it's how many times you get back up. However, again, there's no guarantee that you will get back up, so you're not always given a second chance. So it's not safe to relapse if you don't have to, you know.
I was just going to say that I just Googled who that actress was, and Natasha Lyonne.
Oh,
She's the one that went public about her relapse, and she wasn't saying that relapse is a part of recovery. She really wasn't. I think what she was saying was pretty honorable. She was saying that it's a fact of life that happens, and if it does, don't give up, come back.
yeah.
I think it was pretty courageous of her to come public with it. I thought,
Oh,
and
definitely.
you
I
know,
mean, because there's a lot of shame, that's involved in that, and part of that's good, initially, as long as you don't stay in shame and keep yourself down, because shame is just going to lead you to another drink or another drug, but if you can stay humble and then launch yourself into doing the next right thing, one foot in front of the other, into sobriety, into recovery, then you can, move forward and help lots of people with your story. But if you use it to stay in a self-pity cycle, then you're just going to remain drunk and high.
Yeah, I had a I don't know if how much I can divulge for their anonymity, but I knew someone, I lived with someone who's a roommate. Um, they had they had a lot of pride in like having the coins, but I experienced like a lot of like strange emotional sort of manipulation from this person and then discovered like cans and things and noticed like it seemed like there was a disconnect between being proud of the long stint of sobriety and the actual behavior. So I wonder if there's like there's like an unintentional pressure that people put on themselves to maintain a sobriety and then losing the sobriety. I know I've heard it's like it's one day at a time or something along those lines. I don't know the language,
that's
but
right. That's right.
it's like every day is the first day. So maybe there's like a pressure and that results in a shame, even though the community doesn't seem like it would ever fault you for relapsing.
I can speak to that. A saying that we have is we don't shoot our wounded. So someone relapses, the goal is to not kick them when they're down, but rather help them to get back into sobriety. You know, I had 21 years of continuous sobriety. And then the doctors had me on pain medications that ultimately led to a relapse. And yes, I was very shameful. I felt a lot of shame. And I could have said to myself, wow, which I did, wow, I blew 21 years of sobriety. I was leading meetings, I sponsored a lot of men, et cetera, et cetera. And I could have stayed in that pity cycle, and never gotten sober. So it did take, with humility, it took a level of courage to come back in and stand up in front of all those people and say, I'm back as a newcomer, but there's some people that would say, uh, which I did tell myself, I didn't lose that time at all. I still had that 21 years of experience, so the number really doesn't matter. I just have to pick a new date of sobriety, but I
Hmm.
didn't lose any of that. Like
Right.
today, I'm coming up on 3 years in just a few months from now, but it's the best sobriety I've ever had. And if you look at the big picture, if you add up all the time I've been sober, I've been sober longer than I was using, so at the end of the day, what really matters? But if I choose to, I could stay stuck in that pattern of, oh my gosh, I only have 3 years, but you have to scratch the word only from the equation.
Hmm.
That's just ego.
That's it.
And ego will get you
Right.
drunk.
I think the beautiful thing you said earlier is that you one day, the most, when one day, that's the most, that's the world record, really. And when you talk about years of sobriety, I can relate to your story so much, David, because I had 21 something years too. And then after having a bout of cancer with prostate cancer and going through that, for some reason, it just made me decide I want to try the new weed because I stopped smoking. I stopped everything before the stuff became legal. And for some reason, I thought this won't damage my sobriety. It won't be booze, but it did in fact. And I don't care about coming forward and saying my sobriety date ended when I stopped doing that too, because who cares? The quality of sobriety is what matters. Why did I go out? I think it's because the quality of sobriety was slipping. I was well, first of all, when you get scared by cancer, I could use that as an excuse, but I didn't die from it and I survived it. And I think it made me think, I don't know, life is short. And I felt like I was missing out. I can't think like that because there's plenty of new alcohol drinks I haven't had either. I'm not going to go back
Yeah.
out just to try them, you know? So that's kind of the mentality I had. I tell you, that's the disease. It's subtle. It'll talk to you like, oh yeah, you can do that. Oh, don't worry about that. Yeah, yeah. you know, it's like that little devil on your shoulder. And I was saying to someone earlier that little devil reminds me of Popeye. If you give him one little bit of spinach, all of a sudden his muscles go,
Hmm.
and then his voice gets louder, and you don't hear the one on the other side who's saying, "No, don't do that. You're not supposed to do that. Oh, what am I going to do?" It seems like the good guy, he's still soft spoken. The other guy
Yeah.
has a big, loud mouth, and he will
Is a
get you.
bully.
Yeah, he's a bully, and so
It does sound like an ego-fueled
ego
inner
doubt. Oh,
conversation.
without a doubt, it's the ego. You said it too just now, Dave. It's the ego that did it. And that's what we do with, I think, the 12 steps. It's about becoming right size, becoming humble. And that's why we do them. We stay powerless. We stay reminding ourselves. The first step I always maintain is the most important step. Because
Hmm.
if you don't do that step completely, every single day, I don't care if you did all 12. It's like it'll all come tumbling down in a second.
It's
If you
the only one you have to do 100%.
it is truly that. So tell us more, Dave. I think you can speak to a lot of this stuff with your experiences. That's going to really be a powerful message for Out of the Blue.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I did have a comment. Vernon the third mentioned, and I wanted to comment on that. You were talking about uh, quantity over quality.
Hmm.
There are people that have 30, 35, 40 years, but honestly, I don't want what they have. They've just been dry that amount of time, but they're not really working a program, so someone that has a year or 2 years, they may be on fire in this program, going to meetings, got a sponsor talking to, sponsoring other guys, working the steps, doing all this stuff. Meanwhile, there's a guy with 35 years who's miserable. He's not sponsoring guys, he's not working a program, he just goes to a couple meetings a week. So I think time doesn't necessarily measure up to quality. You
Hmm.
know what I'm saying? I think
Sure.
you
Absolutely.
mentioned that a little bit ago.
Yeah, I hear that loud and
Yeah.
clear.
So it really is truly one day at a time. And what are you doing in this 24-hour period? You
Right.
know?
How much of that time are you spent living as in like living in inverse to the addiction? Like defining yourself by, oh, I'm not doing this thing and sort of staying in this like stasis as opposed to being active in the community and like embracing your newfound sobriety. Does that make sense at all?
Oh my
Are you
God, does it
living in the
ever?
solution or are you living in the problem?
Yeah.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And one of
It
the
seems
main,
like that would be damaging.
and would you say, Dave, I think you're a perfect example that being of service is part of that, if not all of that.
Well, thank you. Yeah, so I flash forward a little bit and I can jump around timelines, but so I was a, you know, pretty successful makeup artist. That was my dream. So well, I'll just backtrack even more. I'm a musician, and my dream had always been since a child. I used to practice, being interviewed because that's what I was going to be a rock star. So I was practicing being interviewed,
You're
what's your
doing,
favorite, album,
you're doing
etc.
great, Dave. This is perfect.
Thank you. And so when I had my major heart attack, the first one at 27, and got sober, I realized, okay, maybe it's time to start thinking about a real job because I'd never had a real job. It always just been musician, too loaded, getting kicked out of bands, and so on and so on. So I went to this vocational rehabilitation and they did all these tests. And again, not to brag, but they said, well, you'd be great at anything you did, which, great news, but it didn't narrow anything down for me.
That's what
So,
I agree with that. I just talking to you, I feel the same way. You have an aptitude that I think is pretty cool.
well, thank you. Well, I do have a huge passion for horror films. Weird, but that's my thing.
That's okay. I,
So,
my son may agree with you. He likes some too, you know.
oh,
I love
that's
them.
really
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, maybe, it's like a fun thrill ride, especially
I
when they're
love it.
good too.
Yeah.
It's tough to find one with like really good writing. You know what I mean?
Yes.
I would
And
love
I
to
don't
pick your
get
brain about that.
nightmares.
Yeah, I
Like,
know.
I challenge a movie to try and actually scare me. It's really, really hard to do. But it's the thrill. I love it. So I looked up my favorite makeup artist, Tom Savini. He did like George Romero zombie movies. He did the makeup for all those. And I started to write him an email, but I kept reading his website. And later down the page, he wrote, and here's a makeup school that I recommend. And there really wasn't many back then. I think his school that he recommended was one of the only ones. And it was called Joe Blasco, and it was in Florida. So I wound up going to that makeup school. And they taught special effects, but they made you learn beauty makeup too. So I wound up actually getting a job in makeup, in beauty makeup, and special effects. And I found I made more money in the beauty and that I was good at it. So I worked in Florida doing both, and I got a job at this place called Sephora, which was brand new.
Sure, we
Then
know
I,
Sephora. Yeah.
yeah. And then they opened one in Vegas. So I moved to Vegas and worked for Sephora and did some side jobs. Then 9/11 happened, and I'm like, oh boy, do I go back to St. Louis with my tail between my legs, or do I make the courageous leap and try Hollywood, California? So I wound up taking my chances, do the scary thing, do it scared. And
Do
I
it
went out to
scared.
Hollywood, do it scared. And I got a job at Hollywood and Highlands Sephora. I started doing horror movies on the side and doing these great makeup jobs on the side for beauty. And I wound up doing this lady's makeup in the store. And turns out she was the head of the home video department for Universal Studios. Next thing you know, I'm their makeup artist. So I'm doing all the celebrities on the planet just about. And then I start teaching at all the big makeup schools in town. And I've got this wonderful career. I'm written up in a magazine. I've got everything that I want. I've built myself a life, in sobriety. Everything's going fantastic. I got a girl, I got everything. Then this voice is telling me, you need to give back. You're just taking. What are you going to do to give back? So I found a school at UCLA. They had a program. It was a substance abuse counseling program. They had it. You could do it in 1 year if you were, really ambitious. Otherwise, it was a 2 year program. I took that program. I did it in 1 year. A classmate saw that I stuck out, and she got me a job at this place called Passages in Malibu. And quickly, the owner said, "Wow, we're answering the phones, the two of us. We think you would be great on the phones." They trained me, and I created the position. I became the director of admissions. And then next thing you know, other Malibu rehabs were like, "We want you to be our director of admissions." And that's how I started my career doing admissions. And I've been doing it for 22 years now.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Whoa. Yeah. What a timeline. It's
A timeline of
really like,
service too.
yeah. And sort of like allowing yourself to pinball around kind of being led these different places, but all the while having inspiration behind them all. Since that is inspiring to me.
Thank you. And it is, it's a very, it's my niche. It's a very tricky job. I don't think, I don't mean to sound like I'm bragging. It's, just like any career, you gotta like be the right person for that job. I don't think just anyone can. It's not just, oh, you answer the phone and that's it. You got to wear a lot of different hats. You know, um, and I just happen to be the right fit for that job. And I haven't burnt out after 22 years. But it's a very intense job.
It's amazing because just for a second, for our audience to understand what I'm thinking is that the people that must call you are they're across the board. They're frantic, they're hysterical, they're calm, all kinds of things. And if you don't say exactly what they want to hear, they're gonna freak out on you. So you gotta have the stamina and the self awareness to stay cool and give only measured and thoughtful responses. That, David, is definitely a calling. Someone that can do that, and you found a way to do that. God bless you, man.
Everybody's in crisis when they call in.
Absolutely, they would have to be, right? I mean,
Either them or a loved one that's calling, but they're in crisis. They're usually crying, and I work 16-hour shifts in a row.
whoa.
So
Whoa.
my goal is to eventually retire and go into private practice as a therapist. So I'm going back to school at my age, and I started a part-time job. A friend of mine owns an outpatient program doing like SATOP, DUI, type situation. And
What's that?
so I run
What's that?
groups.
SATAF? What's that again?
SATOP, it's if
Oh,
you get a
SATAF.
DUI, you have to take group therapy and individual therapy for like 7 weeks.
Okay.
It's different depending on your assessment. So I'm helping him out, and he's helping me out by giving me the job. But I run group therapy and do individual therapy sessions. So that's helping me to get my hours, so I in the school to get my degree, etc.
Exactly. You need those hours, right, to get the degree, become a registered therapist of some kind.
Exactly. Yeah, I want to get my master's in, social work, and then get my LCSW eventually, and then when I retire, I'm going to do full-time private practice.
That's wonderful.
But yeah, what's so crazy to me is that, a former long-haired, tattooed, junkie, crack smoking, drug addict, alcoholic, homeless is now living this life.
Oh
You
my
know,
God. Who do you remind me of, Dave Vernon? Who does she remind you of? Dr. Nicole Labor, who wrote the book, The Addictaholic. And she's all tatted up. But while she was going to medical school, she was a heroin addict. And
wow.
wow, what an amazing person.
Yeah, talk about high functioning. Very, very seriously.
So go ahead, give me some more of this great Loiterstein wisdom.
Yeah, I'm living my best life. I've got an 11-year-old son that I've been raising on my own since he was born.
Wow.
I mean, I'm still a musician. I'm in a band.
Nice. What do you play?
I play drums and I sing. at the
Hey,
same time
nice.
too.
Vernon, what do you do, Vernon?
Come on now, I got a stick right here. What are we
Oh
doing?
yeah,
I'm in like four
homie.
bands as a drummer. But
Oh
cool,
my God,
cool.
that's awesome.
It's the best. Very cathartic, which I'm
It
sure you
is.
appreciate. It's athletic. You get a sweat out. Your mind, you can't think about other things. It's like every limb is going. You're like a well-oiled machine. It is very therapeutic. I'm sure you feel that way.
Oh yeah. Yeah, when I talk to my, group and we talk about filling in the empty hole in the soul or meditation, I bring up drumming, and adding the singing component, the vocals on top of that. I'm splitting my brain to, two hands, 2 feet doing different things. And then I got to sing in addition to that, which is different. So yeah, you can't think
Yeah,
of anything else.
unbelievable.
No.
I can say this as a bass player, it was tough enough for me to learn how to put my body on sort of autopilot so it could play a bass
Hmm.
line that's totally against the melody I'm singing. You know what I mean? You have to, that's similar, but you're doing it with your, I only have 2 hands. You have to use your hands and your feet and
Hmm.
at the same time be emoting a vocal. I mean, that is seriously some serious multitasking.
I don't know how I do it really.
It
It's
is a
like the
med, it's a,
flow state.
yeah, it's
It's
Yeah, you
amazing.
get into this, like mindful or almost mindless, probably, but I'm in a
No,
sure.
rhythm, I'm in a groove.
Well, it's like we usually have an undercurrent of like thoughts that we don't even realize are happening, even as we're just like walking around in life. But when you're doing that, your undercurrent needs to be the drumming, or like one of the two needs to be the sort of like you're doing it like mindlessly. So then you have another thing on top of it. You are fully loaded with positive like charge.
Yeah.
It is like good on you, man.
yeah,
Thank you.
it's
That is
amazing.
a
It really is.
wholesome practice.
I love it. I do
Yeah,
love it.
it's what saved my life, really, because when I got sober, it was like 35 years ago, I was constantly playing music. And that kept my, the ego, the monkey mind, the little spirit of myself trying to talk to me. Like you said, I didn't have time for it because I had to get it, I had to employ it to do what I had to do. And what I did with my music was so uplifting to my soul that I could not imagine doing anything else. And I remember the one thing, and I would say, David, because you don't look your age at all, and I don't,
Thank you.
I'm probably the same because I don't look my age either, but I'm giving
Yeah,
myself
same.
I'm giving myself a
Just kidding.
compliment. You know what I mean? But I'm telling you, I remember playing nightclubs and a guy would come up to me and an old guy come up and go, "Hey, I remember you. We graduated together." And I go, "What? Holy shit!
Yeah.
No way, really?" Then it was amazing because it does keep you young. That stuff keeps you young. I don't know
Well, I
what.
think the secret to sobriety too is, you know, well, let me back up and say when I first got sober, my life drinking and using was full of chaos, and I became addicted to the
Oh
chaos.
yeah, oh yeah, crazy shit.
So when I got sober, it was like boring, and I felt this big empty space that had to be filled. So I fill it with, I'm an artist as well. I like to paint and sculpt and, you know, really anything creative. I'm like a, uh
You fit right in our family. I'll tell you that much. You fit
oh
right
cool.
into
Yeah, arts and
every
crafts,
every
anything
one of
like
us
that.
here.
I will say there's as someone who's not been like I haven't experienced the most chaos in terms of like even music, addiction, these things, but it's still hard to find like it's hard to embrace stability
Hmm.
just in general. How do you like go about that doing that? Is it always looking and being open to a new path of like a career and inspiration?
Well, willingness is definitely the key. If you keep an open mind and stay willingness, because my life had no format, it was just off the cuff. Everything was off the cuff. And now I have to have a what's the word I'm looking for? Routine,
Routine, yeah.
Structure.
structure. Thank you. You know, I go to my set meetings, for Monday, for Tuesday, for Wednesday. I've got a format, a design for living. I know what I'm doing each day of the week. I know everything's laid out. And now I find great comfort in knowing that. And there's still time that's like free time, where I get to do what I want, but now I find, like I said, great comfort in the structure. Where before everything like was willy-nilly and it drove my brain crazy, but I didn't know any better, until I got sober and found that the structure was the best thing for me. It's just like when you raise a child, they actually thrive when you give them boundaries and consequences and structure. They don't like it at first, but that's what helps strengthen them.
Yep.
They
Yep.
need that.
Totally.
You must be a good dad, Dave.
Oh, I don't know. I try my best. I do know that.
You know, we were just talking, it's so funny. We were talking to someone else about how having a kid not in your 20s, but sort of later in life feels like wise and or at least you're able to have a different type of wisdom and maturity in order to really be open to how a child needs to be raised. It is something that as like a 33-year-old, there's a pressure already that I'm late. But then I hear about these inspiring folks like yourself that have embraced, parenthood at a time when it made sense as opposed to a time where they felt like it was necessary. I think that that is also pretty noble. And yeah, and I agree with my dad, who is also a great dad. I'm sure you're a great dad. Just that fact alone, giving a kid some routine and structure and boundaries and consequences is, it's part of I think, I don't know.
No,
No,
I
you're
think you're right.
absolutely right.
Your
I
dad
mean,
is a great dad.
oh,
I had a daughter when I was 19.
that's crazy.
So,
Yeah, that's young.
I felt like
Okay, so you've got
I
a
wanted to do
dichotomy,
things very differently than I did when I was 19. And there was sober and not sober too. So, huge difference.
Sure.
Yeah, but wow, I'm telling you, David, this has been a great podcast. I mean, first of all, one of the things we're going to be doing a lot this season Out of the Blue is delving into recovery because it's a huge component of what Out of the Blue is about. I mean, actually, Out of the Blue is almost a program for recovery for normies. People that don't think they have an addiction, don't even have to have an addiction, but they had something that happened to them that changed them, that altered them, something that came out of the blue. And we find that I've been finding more and more that the, what I've learned from the 12 steps and what I've learned from all that is important to the thriving for everybody, not just people that have had addiction problems or alcohol problems. So, I mean, there's so much work to do, really, for all of us to get this stuff out there because, the world's not doing that great right now. We want to get too political about it, but we know that there needs to be a lot of work done because there's certainly a lot of people living dry drunks out there. That's what it seems like to me, if
I
they're not
just want to
drinking.
say, I don't think it's a very polarizing political stance to say that we don't want our country to be under siege and be unsafe. I think that that's perfectly okay to admit to our audience that we are not okay with wrongful militarization of our country. I'm gonna be the first out of the bluer to put that out there.
Yeah, you are. And I
Fuck
did, and
ICE, okay?
that will not be cut. Except the fuck eyes, might have to cut that, but the rest of it's pretty
No.
cool. No, we
Yeah, I
won't. We
mean,
will not.
I just want to say that because we talk about not getting political, and Dave, of course, I want you to feel comfortable to speak freely, but that is where we are. We are pro humanity. We are pro um, non-violence until non-violence becomes a privilege,
Hmm.
essentially. So
Yeah,
just want
yeah.
to say that.
Right on.
Right on, Vern. It's a
Heavy note to
heavy
sort of
note.
end on, but
Yeah, we're getting near. We're at the ending point of our hour talking, and what a example a power of example you are for everyone out there. So you guys tuning into this Out of the Blue episode, I know you've enjoyed it, and come back again because we're gonna have Dave back for sure.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you so much, David, for sharing your wisdom of a life of a serenity, of a sobriety so well earned. I want to thank you, Dave, for being here with us because it was wonderful. Really was even more wonderful than I thought it was going to be wonderful. I have to admit, but it was even more wonderful than I expected. And yes, you are now officially part of the Out of the Blue family. So, so see you later, and thanks for joining us, everybody. And don't forget to hit that like and smash that subscribe button. And all you got to do, spread the word. We're trying to save the world one podcast at a time. Thanks a lot, everybody, for joining us. Thank you, Vernon, my co-host, and thank you again, Dave Loiterstein. From Out of the Blue, this is Vernon West. Thanks for joining us. Out of the Blue, the podcast, hosted by me, Vernon West, co-hosted by Vernon West III, edited by Joe Gallo, music and logo by Vernon West III. Have an Out of the Blue story of your own you'd like to share? Reach us at info@outoftheblue-thepodcast.org. Subscribe to Out of the Blue on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, and on our website, outoftheblue-thepodcast.org.